It was a crisp October morning in 2016 when the quiet streets of Willow Creek, a sleepy suburb just outside Seattle, were pierced by a scream that no one could ignore. At 7:45 a.m., Sarah Anderson stepped into her family's living room, expecting the usual chaos of her two young kids getting ready for school. Instead, she found a nightmare. There, sprawled across the hardwood floor, lay her husband, Mark Anderson, 38, his lifeless body surrounded by a crimson pool of blood. A single gunshot wound gaped in his chest, stark against the pale blue of his shirt. Nearby, a revolver rested on the rug, chillingly out of place in a home once filled with laughter. Mark was no stranger in Willow Creek. A respected attorney with a warm smile, he was the kind of man who coached Little League and waved to neighbors over the picket fence. But that morning, the facade of his perfect life cracked wide open. Whispers soon surfaced about Emma Larson, the 22-year-old nanny who'd been part of the Anderson household for over a year. Hired to care for their children, Emma had slipped into a role far more dangerous, a secret affair with Mark that no one saw coming. The discovery sent shock waves through the family and beyond. Sarah's anguished cry drew neighbors to their porches, their faces pale as police sirens wailed in the distance. What had started as a forbidden spark between a boss and his nanny had erupted into a tragedy that would unravel everything. How could a home so full of life hide such deadly secrets? To find out, we need to step back to the moment this tangled web began to spin. In the summer of 2015, Willow Creek, Washington, was the kind of place where life felt like a postcard. Tucked among evergreen forests, just a short drive from Seattle, its tree-lined streets and cozy craftsman homes radiated warmth and safety. Families flocked here for good schools and tight-knit neighbors, and at the heart of this idyllic suburb were Mark and Sarah Anderson. To outsiders, they had it all: a thriving marriage, two bright kids, Lila, 7, and Ethan, 5, and a life that seemed to hum with promise. Mark, 37, was a rising star at a downtown law firm, known for his sharp mind and easy charm. With sandy hair and a knack for making clients feel heard, he'd built a reputation as someone you could trust. He worked long hours but always made time for his family, whether tossing a baseball with Ethan or helping Lila with her science projects. Sarah, 35, was his perfect complement. A pediatric nurse with a gentle laugh and endless patience. She juggled hospital shifts and PTA meetings with grace, her warmth anchoring their bustling home. Together, they were the couple everyone envied, their Instagram filled with beach trips and backyard barbecues. But beneath the glossy surface, cracks were forming. Mark's late nights at the office weren't always about case files. The pressure of his caseload left him restless, craving something he couldn't quite name. Sarah, stretched thin by work and parenting, felt the distance growing but chalked it up to the demands of their busy lives. It was into this fragile balance that Emma Larson arrived. Emma, just 22, was the Andersons' nanny, hired in June 2015 after their previous caregiver moved away. Fresh from a small town in Oregon, she had wide hazel eyes and a quiet confidence that made her seem older than her years. To Sarah, Emma was a godsend, reliable, sweet, and adored by the kids. Lila called her Miss Emma with a grin, and Ethan clung to her hand during park trips. Emma's role was clear: keep the household running smoothly, while Mark and Sarah navigated their demanding careers. Yet, even then, there was something about her, a flicker of longing in her gaze, that hinted at deeper desires. Emma had her own struggles. Raised by a single mother who worked double shifts, she'd learned to fend for herself early on. Moving to Willow Creek was her chance to start fresh, but the isolation of being the help in a picture-perfect world weighed on her. She craved connection, a place to belong. As summer faded into fall, Emma's presence in the Anderson home grew more intimate and more dangerous. What was it about this young woman that would tip a stable family into chaos? The answer lies in the moments no one saw coming. By late summer 2015, the Anderson household in Willow Creek buzzed with the rhythm of routine. Lila and Ethan's laughter filled the backyard. Sarah's shifts at the hospital kept her on her toes, and Mark's late nights at the law firm became the norm. But beneath this hum of normalcy, a spark was igniting, one that would soon set everything ablaze. It started innocently enough in the quiet moments after dinner, when Emma Larson, the nanny, lingered in the kitchen with Mark Anderson. Emma had been with the family for 3 months, her presence a steady comfort. She'd braid Lila's hair, read Ethan bedtime stories, and tidy up with a quiet efficiency that Sarah praised. But it was Mark who began to notice her in a different light. One evening in August, as Sarah worked a double shift, Mark came home to find Emma washing dishes, humming softly. The kids were asleep, the house still. "You don't have to stay late," he said, loosening his tie. Emma smiled, her hazel eyes catching the kitchen light. "It's no trouble. Keeps me out of my empty apartment." Her voice was warm, unguarded, and for the first time, Mark felt a pull, a fleeting sense of being seen. That moment was the crack where it all began. Mark, worn by the grind of billable hours and a marriage that felt more like a partnership than a passion, found Emma's attention intoxicating. She listened when he talked about his cases, laughed at his dry humor, and asked questions that made him feel alive. Emma, too, was drawn in. Raised in a world of scarcity, she saw Mark as everything she'd never had: stable, successful, kind. His compliments, subtle at first, lit a fire in her she hadn't known was there. "You're good with the kids," he'd say, then add, "You're good for us." The words lingered, heavy with unspoken meaning. Their conversations grew longer, more personal. By September, Emma stayed late even when Sarah was home, claiming she needed to finish chores. Mark would find reasons to join her, checking the kids' homework, grabbing a glass of water. Their exchanges danced on the edge of propriety, a shared glance over coffee, a brush of hands while passing a toy. In a community like Willow Creek, where family values were sacred, such intimacy was a betrayal of trust, a violation of the unspoken rules that bound neighbors together. Yet neither could pull away. Emma's loneliness fueled her recklessness. She'd lie awake in her tiny studio apartment, replaying Mark's words, convincing herself this was more than a fleeting thrill. Mark, torn between guilt and desire, rationalized it as harmless. After all, they hadn't crossed any lines. Not yet. But the tension was building, like a storm gathering on the horizon. They told themselves no one would know, that their secret was safe in the quiet corners of the house. But secrets have a way of slipping through cracks. What would happen when the spark they had kindled grew too bright to control? By early 2016, the Anderson home in Willow Creek felt like a house holding its breath. Mark and Emma's secret affair, once confined to stolen glances and late-night whispers, had grown reckless. Their meetings spilled beyond the kitchen, quick moments in the garage, hushed talks in the driveway when Sarah was at work. Emma's laughter, once a comfort to the family, now carried an edge that Sarah couldn't quite place. Mark, meanwhile, was unraveling under the weight of his double life, his easy charm replaced by distraction and unease. The spark they'd kindled was burning too hot, and the cracks were starting to show. Sarah noticed the changes first. Mark had always been her rock, but now he was distant, his phone glued to his hand, his excuses vague. "Just work stress," he'd mutter, when she asked why he was home late again. But Sarah wasn't blind. She saw how Emma lingered after her shifts, how her eyes followed Mark a beat too long. At first she brushed it off. Emma was young, practically family. Surely it was nothing. Yet doubt crept in like a shadow. Sarah began watching them, catching the way Mark's voice softened when he spoke to Emma, the way Emma's smile faltered when Sarah entered the room. The air in the house grew thick with unspoken questions. Others noticed, too. Lila, at 7, was perceptive beyond her years. "Why does Miss Emma stay so late?" she asked Sarah one evening, her brow furrowed. Sarah forced a smile, but the question lingered. Neighbors whispered about Emma's car parked at the Andersons past bedtime, their voices low at school pickups. In Willow Creek, where everyone knew everyone's business, secrets didn't stay buried long. Mark and Emma, lost in their bubble, convinced themselves they were careful. They weren't. Their recklessness was a beacon, and someone was bound to see. The discovery came on a rainy afternoon in March 2016. Sarah, home early from a canceled shift, decided to tackle the family's overflowing laundry. As she sorted through Mark's briefcase for stray socks, her fingers brushed against his phone. It buzzed, lighting up with a text from "EL kids are asleep by 8." Sarah's heart stopped. She swiped open the phone. Mark's password was still their anniversary, and what she found shattered her world. Messages, dozens of them, between Mark and Emma, words of longing, plans for secret meetups, promises to figure it out. Each text was a knife, carving away the life Sarah thought she knew. She stood frozen, rain drumming against the windows as betrayal sank in. Her husband, the man she'd built a family with, had crossed a line she'd never imagined. Emma, the girl she'd trusted with her children, had woven herself into their home's heart and torn it apart. Sarah's hands trembled, torn between rage and despair. Confrontation loomed like a storm cloud. What would she do with this truth? And how far would this unraveling push them all? On the evening of October 12, 2016, the Anderson home in Willow Creek stood quiet under a blanket of autumn stars. The kids, Lila and Ethan, were tucked into bed, their soft snores drifting down the hall. Sarah was at the hospital, pulling a late shift, unaware that the fragile threads holding her family together were about to snap. Inside, Mark and Emma faced each other in the dimly lit living room, the weight of their affair pressing down like a storm ready to break. What began as a spark of forbidden desire had spiraled into a tangle of guilt, fear, and desperation, a collision course no one could stop. The night started with a confrontation. Emma had slipped into the house after the kids were asleep, her face taut with urgency. She'd been pressing Mark for weeks to leave Sarah, to start a new life with her. "We can't keep doing this," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I love you, Mark. Don't you love me?" Mark paced, his hands raking through his hair. He was drowning in guilt. Sarah's suspicions had sharpened, and he'd seen the hurt in her eyes. "It's not that simple," he snapped. "I have kids, a life. You knew this." His words cut deep, and Emma's eyes flashed with pain, then anger. She stepped closer, her voice rising. "You promised me we'd figure it out. Was it all a lie?" The argument escalated, their voices a jagged dance of accusations and pleas. Emma, feeling betrayed, grabbed Mark's arm, her nails digging in. Mark pulled away, his frustration boiling over. "You need to leave," he said, his tone final. But Emma wasn't leaving, not like this. She lunged toward him, shoving him against the couch. In the chaos, her purse spilled open, and a small kitchen knife, kept for peeling fruit during nanny shifts, clattered to the floor. Time froze for a heartbeat. Then, in a blur of panic and rage, Emma snatched it up. Mark's eyes widened. "Emma, stop!" he started, raising his hands. But her hurt had morphed into something feral. She swung the knife, the blade slicing into his chest. Mark stumbled, shock etching his face as blood bloomed through his shirt. He gasped, clutching the wound, but Emma struck again, each thrust fueled by a torrent of rejection and despair. Mark collapsed, his body crumpling onto the hardwood, the life draining from his eyes. The room fell silent, save for Emma's ragged breaths and the soft drip of blood pooling beneath him. Emma stood frozen, the knife slipping from her trembling fingers. Reality crashed in. She'd crossed a line she could never uncross. Panic seized her. She staggered back, her mind racing. Should she run? Call for help? Instead, she sank to her knees, staring at Mark's lifeless form, her sobs muffled by her hands. The revolver Mark kept in a locked drawer for home protection lay untouched. She hadn't planned this, hadn't meant for it to end like this, but it was done. Hours later, Sarah's scream shattered the night as she returned home and found her husband's body. Neighbors, roused by the sound, peered from windows as police lights flooded the street. The Anderson home, once a haven of laughter and love, was now a crime scene, its walls echoing with betrayal's cost. Emma was gone, vanished into the night, but her absence screamed guilt. How had a fleeting affair led to such carnage? As the police cordoned off the house, one question loomed. Where was the nanny now, and what would her next move be? The morning of October 13th, 2016, dawned cold and gray over Willow Creek. The Anderson home, now a grim tableau cordoned off by yellow tape. Police officers moved with quiet precision, their boots crunching on fallen leaves as neighbors watched from their lawns, faces pale with disbelief. Mark Anderson's murder had torn through the suburbs' veneer of safety, and the question on everyone's lips was, who killed the man everyone thought they knew? Leading the charge was Detective Rachel Torres, a 15-year veteran with a reputation for unraveling messy truths. Her sharp eyes scanned the blood-stained living room, sensing this case was more than a random act. It was personal. Torres began with the obvious, the crime scene. The knife, smeared with Mark's blood, lay abandoned near his body, its handle wiped clean of prints, a clumsy attempt to cover tracks. No signs of forced entry suggested the killer was someone Mark knew. Sarah, still reeling from shock, gave a tearful statement. She'd been at work until midnight, arriving home to find her husband dead. Her alibi checked out, but her mention of Emma Larson, the nanny who'd been acting strange, sent Torres's instincts into overdrive. Emma was nowhere to be found, her apartment empty, her phone off. The missing nanny was now suspect number one. Initial leads were thin. Neighbors reported seeing Emma's car near the house around 9 p.m., but no one saw her leave. Torres's team canvassed Willow Creek, chasing whispers of tension in the Anderson household. Lila's teacher mentioned the girl's recent moodiness, hinting at grown-up fights she'd overheard. The first break came from Mark's phone, recovered from his briefcase. Unlocked by Sarah's trembling hands, It revealed a string of texts with Emma, heated exchanges about ending things and telling Sarah. One message, sent hours before the murder, chilled Torres. "If you leave me, you'll regret it." The words painted Emma as desperate, possibly unhinged. Forensic evidence deepened the case. A partial print on the knife's blade matched Emma's, left when she gripped it too tightly. Blood spatter analysis showed a frenzied attack, multiple stab wounds, no hesitation marks. But a puzzling detail emerged. Traces of Emma's own blood, a tiny smear on the living room rug. Had she been injured in a struggle? Torres theorized Mark might have fought back, complicating the narrative of a cold-blooded killer. The team scoured Emma's apartment, finding a packed suitcase and a bus ticket to Portland, dated for the next day. She'd planned to flee, but hadn't made it far. The turning point came on October 15th, when a gas station clerk 20 miles away reported a young woman matching Emma's description, nervous, with a bandaged hand. CCTV footage confirmed it. Emma, pale and disheveled, buying coffee at 3 a.m. Torres issued a statewide alert, and by October 17th, Emma was tracked to a cheap motel in Tacoma. Officers found her curled on a bed, staring blankly at the wall, her knuckles bruised, and a fresh cut on her palm. When Torres cuffed her, Emma didn't resist, whispering, "I didn't mean for it to happen." Her words were a confession, but her eyes told a story of regret and fear. The arrest hit Willow Creek like a thunderclap. Emma, the girl who'd read bedtime stories to Lila and Ethan, was now a murderer in handcuffs. Torres felt the weight of the case. Mark's death was a tragedy, but Emma's unraveling was its own kind of loss. As the evidence locked into place, one question lingered. What drove a young woman to such a deadly breaking point? The courtroom would soon decide her fate, but the truth was already cutting deeper than any verdict could. When the gavel fell in June 2017, the echoes of Mark Anderson's murder trial lingered far beyond the Seattle courtroom. Willow Creek, once a haven of suburban serenity, will forever scarred. The Anderson home, where laughter once rang, stood empty, its for sale sign a silent testament to a family shattered. Sarah Anderson faced a future she never imagined, raising Lila and Ethan alone, grappling with the betrayal of a husband she thought she knew. At night she'd sit in the dark, replaying the years, wondering how love had turned so deadly. Yet for her children she carried on, her strength a quiet defiance against the pain. Emma Larson, just 23, began her 20-year sentence at Washington Correction Center for Women. The girl who dreamed of a fresh start was now a number, her hazel eyes dulled by regret. Behind bars, she enrolled in counseling, scribbling letters she'd never send, to Sarah, to the kids, pleading for forgiveness she knew she didn't deserve. Her story became a whispered caution in Willow Creek, a reminder of how desperation can twist hope into destruction. The community, too, felt the ripple effects. Neighbors grew wary, their trust in perfect families eroded. PTA meetings buzzed with hushed debates. Could this happen to us? The tragedy forced Willow Creek to confront uncomfortable truths. Affairs, though taboo, weren't rare. But what pushed Emma to kill? Was it love turned obsession, or a deeper wound no one saw? In a town bound by appearances, the pressure to uphold a flawless facade had hidden cracks until they shattered. Mark's death wasn't just a crime, it was a mirror reflecting the fragility of human connections when trust is betrayed. For Sarah, healing was a slow climb. She moved her family to a new town, enrolling Lila and Ethan in therapy to mend their broken hearts. She found solace in small acts, baking cookies with her kids, reading them stories Emma once told. But the scars remained, a reminder of a life upended. Emma's fate, meanwhile, sparked debate. Some saw her as a monster, others a young woman crushed by circumstance. Her sentence offered justice, but could it ever repair the loss? This story, like so many, leaves us with questions. What drives someone to cross that final line? How do we rebuild when trust is gone? Mark, Sarah, and Emma's lives collided in a moment of chaos, leaving a legacy of lessons and loss. If this tale of love and betrayal struck a chord, hit that like button and subscribe for more true crime stories that peel back the human heart. Share your thoughts below. Could Sarah ever forgive, or is some damage too deep? And check out our next case where a teacher's secret affair spirals into tragedy. Stay curious, and we'll see you in the next story.